Hello. Welcome, everybody. Why don't I try singing? Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to us. Because America is near the 4th of July, which is our birthday. But Eric's birthday was even earlier, July 1st. Let us begin. Welcome, everybody. I want to tell you that today will be very different. I've been thinking, as the world evolves, we're changing. And since we evolve through billions and billions of years, not through minutes, I'm afraid of what's happening as the machines take over. And I realized people don't do things in depth anymore. Short messages and no questions, just papers. And I'd like to talk about it, and I'd like to get your opinions. There came a time when I realized my generation loved long stories. Children were told stories that had beginnings and end, and things in between. Hansel and Gretel, for example, had wicked witches. They don't exist anymore. Everything is very quick, and I resent it. Because I began to think of my life when I decided I needed to know who people were, so I could figure out why they hate so much. Maybe if they knew people whom they hated, they would accept them. And so my whole life was doing painting, showing people who they are. But now, the way things are going, nobody's going to be interested in finding out why a person did what they did and why they did it. And I want to go back. And so I'd like to begin by asking each one of you, who formed you? Why are you who you are? And to really sit down and take notes and find out who you are. Was it a parent? Was it a friend? Was it a dog you had who showed you that you belong? Because I think the searching in every one of us is, who am I? How did I get here? And since nobody came back from dying, we don't know when we die who we are. I'm close to that. I'm 95 and about to become 96. And when I sit there and look at the world, I think I have to take it back with me. Maybe someday, when I'm not in this earth anymore, I want to remember this room. I'd like all of us to begin to think of how deep do we go into knowing who we are. Are there any comments?
So far, well, Ed Weedman says, hi, Hetty. And then the only other comment, my dad says, you helped form me.
Yes. Let me ask it differently. Let me begin with the people closest to me. Let me begin with my father. If I look at my father in depth, he was a poor child. Mentally, he was not poor. He loved to write, and he loved to examine things. We were in Vienna, where I was born, and he would walk through the streets with my brother and me, and not allow us to speak, but just to feel it. So, who am I? I feel places. When I walk into New York, I feel New York. And I don't talk. If I'm with somebody who wants to speak, I ask them not to talk. And my hearing cooperated, because my hearing is so bad that I say to people, if you speak to me, then I have to hear you, and I have to strain to hear you, and it ruins my pleasure. My mother is the other part. She was a poet. She loved writing, and it was always poetic. So wherever I am, I look for beauty. And as for Eric didn't hide anything. When he proposed to me, after long, long walks, before he proposed, he said, I have so much hate in me. Eric was a concentration camp survivor. And he said, I have so much anger and so much hate. And since there are no Nazi guards around me, the hate is in my mind and my body. And if I let it stay there, eventually it'll kill me. And he said, the reason I walked so much with you and asked you so many questions, I had to find out who you are, because if I am with people who hate, it feeds my hate. And how things connect. There's a man in Long Beach who walks the boardwalk. His name is Lee. And he talks to people. He spoke to me one day and he said, Eddie, tell me your story. And I said, well, I was born in Vienna. And he said, have you ever heard of the children's transport? And I said, no. And he said, in Vienna, there was a group from England who came to the Hitler world to find out what was going on. And the group began with Quakers. And I got to meet those people. Jesse, could you pick up that book in front of you? Could you show it?
Yes, I can.
That's the Kindertransport.
Hold it.
These people went to Vienna, my Vienna, and found parents and said to them, give me your children and I'll make sure that the Nazi world cannot kill them. And to ask a parent to give up a child on a theory was difficult. But they survived, and that book proves it. How do we meet people in depth? What are we missing by short sentences which say, I'm coming in 10 minutes? Or which don't ask, how did you get here? As my friend Lee does. And as I do when I paint somebody. Don't let that world disappear, where we ask no questions. Where we just say, I'll see you later. First of all, 10 different people have 300 different machines. And they carry them in one telephone. And they ask for things. And if you don't have that kind of connection on your phone, you don't hear them. I'd like to let this program deal with that. How much do we not want to know? Do we need to isolate ourselves from the miracle of the universe? We were formed and are still being formed billions of years ago. In me, there are more bits of humans whom I will never meet. But somehow, since my brain and my body is made of billions of people, how do I know who I'm listening to? I'd like us to become more of the miracle which we are. I am a miracle. Today I had to go to the doctor because I have a rash on my legs, and it was in the hospital. And there was a woman doctor, very graceful woman, with bones which fit into each other. And I watched the way she sat there when she asked the question, how bones crept into bones. And she was so graceful. And shortly afterwards, a man walked by whose body was quite deformed. And nothing went into anything. The bones went sideways. And I thought, what a miracle we are. And so is our brain. Talk to me about it. Make a comment about the miracle you are. Is it too difficult a question because you have been trained not to ask questions, especially in politics? Because there's punishment, physical punishment, as in being deported. I'd like to tell you something about why every part of me wants to speak. When Hitler came to Vienna, my family and I went into hiding. My brother and I were hidden in the linen closet when the first pounding came on the door. My mother put us into the linen closet. I remember the linen closet more than I remember Vienna. And Vienna was wonderful. Eric said once, let's not let our childhood be ruined by memories. There was more to Vienna than fear. Tell about it. And I did. Short sentences and no research make us only remember the worst. Eric and I went back to Vienna, and I forgot what I learned through that book. What would have happened to me if people in England wouldn't have done a Kindertransport? I want you to realize we are made of so much. Technology will make it disappear. The same technology which shows me the moon. It's how we use it. Use the technology to ask questions. Ask about yourself.
You have a few comments.
I'd love them.
Let's see. Dina says, happy birthday to Eric tomorrow.
Yes.
Love you, Hetty. Love to your family. My dad says, that was such a beautiful description of how bones go into bones. Hernan says, your brilliant words and insights inspire me. And then Dina also says, everyone who has touched our lives, like you, create the person we are today. Thank God for you. Your love of life to live. How many lives you have touched. So grateful for you. And then my dad says, you remember the linen closet more than you remember Vienna. Wow.
Yeah.
And then Hernan also says, I will be in Vienna in 2 weeks, and your words will be with me as I walk the streets with Christopher and his aunt.
When I discovered my friend Hernan, he changed my life. Hernan has a habit of sending me photographs, and it says 15 years ago or 10 years ago, and since he's a family friend, Jesse is always in those pictures. And Hernan has given me gifts which nobody else could give me. He gives me my family background, but he doesn't just give them, he picks them with love. When Hernan sends me information, my heart is filled with warmth. This book about Vienna, which was sent to me by people who were rescued, made me realize what I escaped from. I escaped from the Hitler world. And the funny thing is, the reason we escaped, I had an uncle in Panama. Look at this strange way in which things connect. He fell in love, or at least wanted the attention of a village girl in Poland. And he wanted to give her a gift. So he went to his mother's jewelry box and took out a brooch and gave it to her. But she wasn't interested in jewelry. She needed cash. And so she went to the local jeweler and sold that brooch to him. He went to my grandmother, whom he knew, bought jewelry, and said, I would like to show you this brooch which you could buy. And she looked at it and she said, but this is mine. I have it. How did you get it? And she went to a jewelry box and he did not have it. And the world being what it was at that time, how could a son of his be a thief? His father, Uncle Max's father, sent him out into the world and said, leave my home. At that time, you didn't find jobs. You couldn't work. But at that time, the Panama Canal was being built. And he went, this boy who came from a well-to-do family, went to Panama. And he discovered that liquor sold. And so he became a barkeeper. And a very wealthy one eventually. Wealthy enough to send 2 nieces to medical school and visas to my family. And I am alive with this complicated story. And I know about it from a friend, Lee Winters, who walks on the boardwalk and asks people about their lives. So, stop doing shortcuts and tell the world how you became who you are. Because each of us is a miracle. And today when I watched the lady doctor taking her leg and putting it on a step, and I watched the way the muscles walked into each other. And shortly after, a man walked by whose muscles did not walk into each other. And I thought, I haven't appreciated my muscles enough. Stop. Begin to look at the miracle you are. And then comment to me again.
Well, we are out of time, but you do have a few more comments before we end, so let me read that to you.
Yes.
So, Jay Horowitz says, agreed, we are all miracles. So great to listen and see you again, Hetty. Your perceptions of life are very special to me, and everyone else, I'm sure. Let's see. Tibor says, Hetty, I am your age. I spent all 5 years under the Nazi regiment in fascist Slovakia. Lived like a forest animal, more than 200 days and nights in snow-covered mountains. 12 years later, after the Second World War, I was an engineer and a PhD, and an artist as well. Penny Pinsky says, hi, Hetty. And then Gary says, hello, Hetty, so glad to listen to your story. Tibor says, and we are all miracles. And then Milo Shapiro says, what a lovely surprise to stumble upon this just now. Lovely. Oh. Ed Weedman says, we love you, Hetty.
You know what? When I began to do my paintings, it was to find out why people killed each other, and to find out why there was so much hate. And I thought by painting people, they wouldn't hate each other because they would know each other. Let me ask you, help me with this. Get to know the people who you were once afraid of.
We're done. Say goodbye.
I love you all.